Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're taking a look at the consensus top 3 wide receivers from the 26 class, being Carnell Tate, Jordyn Tyson, and Makai Lemon. Taking a look at some of their all-22 strengths and potential areas to improve upon, some more advanced stats that I haven't shown in previous videos, and then compare them and stack them, at least with what I thought of other prospects from 24 and 25 that were taken in the first and top of the second round, tiering them out. So if you want to see at least where I think these guys fit in compared to the 24 and 25 classes stacked on top of each other, watch to the end of this video. And keep in mind that this is from a pre-draft process perspective and what I thought of these guys, once again, before the actual NFL draft. So watch to the end of this video and you should have a pretty good idea. While some all-22 clips display some of what I'm going to be mentioning here, I'm going to read you a brief synopsis of Jordyn Tyson, some of his strengths and potential areas to improve upon. Then we're going to take a look at some advanced stats and some positive and negatives about him to consider. So Jordyn Tyson is a redshirt junior out of Arizona State who projects to have absolute positional versatility as an XZ or slot at the next level and projects to be a candidate to be a team's wide receiver 1 at the next level, in my opinion. His usage at Arizona State was a mixture of being an X, Z, and slot, with a 25% slot usage and 74.7 boundary usage this season. I think he can and will dominate from every receiver position at the next level and will establish himself early on as a productive rookie, assuming he doesn't go to a team with multiple established star wide receivers. He's around 6'2" and 200 pounds and possesses a lot of skills that should immediately translate at the next level. His route running is an absolute art, and his combination of attacking leverage and lateral agility allow him to make opposing cornerbacks look foolish trying to keep up with them. He creates quick separation with ease against man coverage and has a good understanding of beating zone as well, but at times does use wasted movement in an attempt to sell routes against man, where I think he could win by, more by the book precision. But I've seen so many successful reps without wasted movement that I think this will be improved with NFL coaching and will eventually be a non-issue. He runs a particularly nasty fade route from both the slot and the outside X position, which should make him a good option in the red zone if he ends up with a quarterback that can throw them with, any semblance of accuracy. He does need to work on defeating press man, which I think is due to a need to improve hand placement technique to strike first, as well as potentially try to improve his overall play strength in order to keep up. But this is not such a weakness that I think he can't or won't improve at the next level. He almost always stepped up when playing ranked competition, and that's a valuable part of a prospect profile. He has quite a few injuries and has missed a lot of time during his collegiate career. But I think this is going to be a Puka type of deal where, he's so talented that you'll regret passing up on him because of being risk adverse. He's much better after the catch than the stats show, in my opinion, and yak ability is a key trait that I look for with wide receiver prospects. He can break tackles with physicality or make people miss with sudden moves in the open field with ease. He also makes acrobatic plays in the air with a fantastic vertical jump that he combines with his ball tracking ability to make routine highlight grabs. While he doesn't have elite burner speed, his acceleration is pretty nice, and he is fast enough that his overall speed won't be a deterrent for an NFL team feeling comfortable lining him up anywhere on the field. And he should be a highly coveted prospect who should have a very high ceiling. Now, moving on to some of the advanced stats here, this is going to be a 2-year sample size for these stats here. His 2-year yards per out run of 2.74 was 85th percentile among collegiate wide receiver prospects. His 2-year yards after catch of 5.2 was 34th percentile. Once again, I think the film is better than the stats show. His separation percentage overall of 78.6% was 82nd percentile, very good. Specifically, his separation percentage against single coverage of 66.7% was 80th percentile as well. Taking a look at his contested catch percentage, his 54.8% is 84th percentile, and he also has really good hands, boasting a 2-year sample size drop percentage of 5.4%, which is 74th percentile. Further looking into some more positive things, his college dominator rating, which is his market share of the team's yards and touchdowns, of 46.8% is 94th percentile. He was the team's offense. His target share of 34.2% is also 97th percentile. He was an elite target earner. Targets are earned, contrary to some people's belief. And he was an early breakout, breaking out at 18.1 years old, which is 99th percentile. Really, in my opinion, the only thing about his game that is worrying is his injury history. He suffered a ligament knee injury in 2022 and a collarbone injury in 2025. along with little nagging injuries in between. So I personally, once again, think this is going to be a Puka type of deal where he's a supreme talent. It's just sometimes he is going to be injured. And after seeing the success Puka's had at the next level and thinking about it, I really think that I would personally take the risk with Jordyn Tyson. Now, while some All-22 clips display some of what I'm going to be mentioning here, I'm going to read you once again a brief synopsis of Makai Lemon, his strengths and potential areas to improve upon, before we get to some more advanced stats and potential things that I really like and potential concerns about him at the next level. So Makai Lemon is a true junior out of USC who, in my opinion, best projects to be a slot/Z receiver at the next level, and possesses a ton of upside for real-life NFL teams and fantasy players alike next season. His usage this season at USC was that of a primary slot receiver with a 70.6 slot percentage and 27.9 boundary percentage, where he, when at the boundary, was generally used as a Z. I think that he is best utilized in the slot, but should be used in two wide receiver sets pretty quickly as he grows to the next level. He's listed at 5'11" and 195 pounds, which is a reasonably dense build that should help him absorb hits and break tackles at the next level. He's not the burstiest receiver off the line, but I do think he has solid build-up speed, and it's kind of underrated, and won't stop him from creating chunk gains with regularity. He has incredible hands and consistently makes catches away from his body, even against the grain. His length is a limitation in that he doesn't have the best catch radius, but if the ball is placed within it, he's coming down with it pretty much every single time. He's a nuanced route runner who adjusts his route depth with ease and has no issues with finding holes in zone coverage. He's also a menace after the catch, and he shows this with a good understanding of creating advantageous angles and manipulating them as well, but also brings the power to break tackles and agility and spatial awareness to juke people to create additional yards after catch. Now, he does struggle with press coverage, but I don't think this will inhibit him because I don't think he's going to face it with regularity due to probably being a primary slot receiver at the next level. And I certainly think that, whatever team drafts him will be happy to have done so, and he will be an immediate contributor. Overall, he is one of the best receiver prospects in the class and deserves to be treated as such. Now, moving on to, once again, some 2-year sample sizes of advanced stats. His yards per out run of 3.09 was 94th percentile. His yards after catch of 6.7 was 77th percentile. His 2-year separation percentage of 81.1 was 87th percentile. His separation percentage versus single coverage of 62.5% was 66th percentile. His contested catch percentage of 57.1% was 93rd percentile. And his dropped pass percentage of 2.2% was 99th percentile. Like I said, when the ball is within his catch radius, he's coming down with it every single time. Now, one interesting stat that I saw on X was that Makai Lemon was the only receiver prospect since 2023 to have over 3.0 yards per out run, both versus man and zone coverages for their entire career. And the only other, player to do this within 2023 to 2026 here is Jackson Smith-Njigba, another prolific, generally viewed as a slot receiver coming out of college, who did have the positional versatility to be moved around the field. I don't think he's exactly like JSN, but I do think there are some similarities to their game. But once again, a couple of potential negatives. He doesn't really have that elite top-end speed. I would say it's at best average. The burst is fine, but it's kind of more like, build-up speed, but the ending speed isn't particularly dominant. Another thing, like I said, being 5'11", 195 pounds, he's just not the biggest receiver. Now, fortunately, in today's NFL, that doesn't necessarily matter as much. But, ideally, you would be able to have all the skills that he does and also just be bigger at the same time. And also, once again, he is going to struggle, I think, versus press coverage. But at the same time, I don't think he's going to face it very often because I think he's specifically going to be schemed so that he doesn't have to. And moving on to Carnell Tate. Carnell Tate is a true junior out of Ohio State who, depending on how his future team decides to utilize him, combined with the quarterback play he receives, has a lot of upside. There are two different paths for him, in my opinion, and that is whether he's primarily deployed as an X or if he sees more work as a Z/slot. I think that if he is drafted by a team to be the X receiver, he will be significantly quarterback dependent, and that he will be receiving less efficient targets down the field in that role, which requires a quarterback that is able to both access that part of the field with arm talent and accurate enough to give him catchable balls. Think George Pickens with the Steelers versus the Cowboys. In order for Tate to be successful at the next level, his usage at Ohio State, 9.9 slot percentage and 89.2 boundary percentage, is generally not ideal for producing for us in fantasy, as a boundary-specific X receiver role is the worst for consistent production, albeit very useful for a real-life team. If he sees more work as a mixture of a Z and slot, I think this will be great for us in fantasy, as these roles are generally target-heavy roles in modern NFL offenses, and I think he would be successful in that role. Now, he provides great height at 6'3", but is a little bit light at 195 pounds. As an X, he does provide several prerequisites for success, such as incredible ball tracking, contested catchability, and an ability to beat both man and zone coverage with consistency. I do think he needs to improve his play strength against press coverage, and he lacks the deep speed to consistently separate vertically, which, while he does have wins deep down the field, is more so in general due to ball tracking and contested catchability down the field than it is with natural separation due to speed. He sells vertical routes quite well before breaking them off, so a linear vertical X route tree is well within his skill set, but due to his frame and long strides, he does at times struggle with breaking down on the comeback routes consistently, but does show wins on film. I don't think this is how to best utilize him, however. I think he fares much better against off coverage, where he can have free releases to avoid having to separate from physical cornerbacks. And I think he can avoid these concerns by being asked to play Z and slot primarily, where his fantastic feel for zone coverage and size allow him to be a very friendly target for his quarterback. If he's asked to play this role, he will receive higher efficiency targets that will allow him to produce much more for us in fantasy and allow him to dominate against linebackers and smaller corners, specifically in the slot. Now, he's a fantastic blocker who will dominate and seal edges for his running back against linebackers and safeties. One thing I would really like to see improvement with is his yak ability, which I think is pretty average, and that if there's open space, he will run forwards for additional yardage, but he lacks creativity as a runner and doesn't make many people miss. Overall, I like him as a player, and I think he will be extremely valuable to an NFL offense, but I do think landing spot will matter a ton for him, because if he's an X without a good quarterback, he could struggle to produce for us due to factors outside of his own control, combined with some of his limitations. But if he's primarily a Z or a slot, he will be much less quarterback dependent, and all those skills he does have to be successful at the Z and slot position will allow him to excel early. Moving on to some advanced stats and then some interesting things I found about him. So taking a look at his yards per out run, once again over 2 year sample size, his 2.48 yards per out run were 73rd percentile. His yards after the catch of 4.6 was 22nd percentile. Like I said, doesn't really offer much after the catch at all, but here is where it gets really good. His separation percentage of 88.0% is 98th percentile. His 75% separation percentage against single coverage is 95th percentile. And even more impressive somehow than those, his contested catch percentage over the 2 years of 75% is 100th percentile. That is crazy. And with that comes a really remarkable dropped pass percentage of 2.9%, which is 97th percentile as well. So some of these advanced stats tell us that he gets open very easily and catches just about anything that he can. Now, a couple of interesting stats. Among qualified draft-eligible power forward wide receivers, his 3.52 yards per out run were first. His 85.7 contested catch percentage of the season was first. His 3.10 yards per out run versus zone was second. His 18.0 yards per reception was second. And his 83% catch rate was third. Now, those numbers are elite. But if you watch the prospect profile video, he absolutely shredded and dominated against, poor defenses and teams that weren't ranked and were no match for Ohio State. But he didn't really produce very much outside of one game against ranked competition. And so one interesting thing I found, in 14 career games versus ranked opponents, he's had 40 total receptions, that's 2.9 per game, 525 receiving yards at 37.5 per game, and 3 touchdowns. Like I said, I really do value the being able to win against players that you might actually see at the next level, ranked opponents consistently. And while his advanced stats and some things on film really pop off, and leads you to believe that he will be a dominant receiver at the next level, I do find his play against ranked competition to be very, very concerning. Um, and now his yak perception of 4.5 and 6 missed tackles forced isn't particularly great. That makes sense. You know, the yak of 4.6 over the 2 years was 22nd percentile. But these kind of things do worry me. And I want to give a special shout out to my Patreon members. Thank you to Big Hunt, SP, Mage Jack, Infamy MTG, AOYOB, The Dawn, and Any Buckeye. Thank you guys. I'm doing this full time now, and without your support, this would not be possible. If you'd like to become a member, I'm going to leave a link in both the comment section and description of this video. You'll receive not only, but including access to a Discord where we have a channel where we have NFL and college football talk, as well as a channel where we have fantasy football talk, and a third channel where we laugh at poor trade offers that we've been offered in fantasy football. But if you'd like to, you can always DM me with private, questions if you don't wish for it to be known by any community members. But you'll also get help with building your fantasy football teams every year. I'll use wins above replacement, as well as just looking at the general lineup and scoring settings to help you with your teams each year. I'll help you with trades that are advantageous based on those factors as well. You'll be part of a fun and growing active community. You'll not only receive access to videos early guaranteed, but you'll also have the ability to ask for personal videos that you and only you can view. Or potentially, if you'd like something to be shown on the channel, you'll have preferential treatment there as well. So please consider becoming a member. I'd really appreciate it. Let's get back to the video. Now, moving on to where I have these receivers ranked, stacked up with 2024 and 2025 in terms of receivers that ended up getting first or top of the second round draft capital. This is from a pre-draft perspective, taking a look at counting stats, advanced stats, and the all-22 film, not taking a look at what I think of them now after they played or even after they've actually received the draft capital. So in the elite tier, the only two players from 2024 through 26 that I think were elite prospects were Malik Nabers and Travis Hunter. With Malik Nabers, elite athlete, I comped him to a combination of Antonio Brown and Jamar Chase. Ridiculous separation, ridiculous yak, insane athleticism, dog mentality. I have, in the past couple of years, there's no player I was more confident in hitting and would be more surprised if he busted than Malik Nabers. Insane prospect. I also thought Travis Hunter was a very close second. I thought he was a bigger Devontae Smith, crafty route runner. I really liked his ability to adjust his route during the play based on the coverage the defense was running. I thought that was very impressive, and I think his understanding of what the cornerback's seeing and playing cornerback himself greatly helped him out there. And he had probably the best ball skills of any receiver that I've seen over the past couple of seasons. The only real downside, in my opinion, was that how much receiver or cornerback would he play? Could he stay healthy? So his biggest weakness, I thought, was just that he was learning the position. But he was also, 1,000+ yards while learning two different positions and playing them at the same time. So the sky is the limit, and I still think the same is true. He broke out with over 100 yards the game in his final week in which he played, and then he was injured in practice the following week. Moving on to the great tiered prospects, at least in my opinion, from a pre-draft process perspective, I had MHJ in this tier. I comped him to AJ Green. He was a complete receiver with elite route running and release packages, the most pro-ready prospect I've probably seen. But I had questions about his athleticism and his ability to separate against more, elite athletes than he faced in college. So I thought that Nabers had the higher ceiling, and I liked him a little bit more as a prospect. But as far as the floor, I would have been probably the most surprised if MHJ truly was a bust than anybody. I thought his greatest strength was his route running, and his biggest weakness was potentially athleticism / yak ability. He was okay after the catch, doesn't really do too much. Rome Odunze, I comped him to Devontae Adams. Much like MHJ, was a complete X receiver, but he had also some of the best ball skills I've seen from a prospect, along with a lot more positional versatility, I thought, because I thought he was faster than MHJ. But deep speed, I do think, was a concern at the time because a lot of those catches down the field were contested, but he was very successful there. So I thought that his hands were his biggest strength and his deep speed / yak was his greatest weakness. Then we also had McMillan in this tier. I comped him to Brandon Marshall, a lot of positional versatility, dangerous yak ability. But I thought the deep speed was a little bit questionable. He has shown an ability to win deep down the field at the next level, though. So ultimately, that concern was alleviated, fortunately. Really good player. Brian Thomas, I was higher on him than I think a lot of people were coming out. I thought he was a combination of Martavis Bryant and Julio Jones. Dangerous deep threat with athleticism and lateral agility, and yak ability to be able to be a dominant wide receiver one at the next level. And he showed that he could do that as a rookie. Did struggle with injury, I think, and learning a new system in year 2. So hopefully we see better from him than we saw this season in the future. But his athleticism and specifically his acceleration / deep speed were his biggest strength. But his hands, he liked to basket catch a lot and kind of bobbles catches too much, were his biggest weakness. And that's kind of been realized at the next level. Then we have Luther Burden, who I was also a lot higher on than I think some people. A lot of people saw the numbers, the counting stats that he had in his junior season and thought that he regressed. No, his quarterback was playing injured and his quarterback play was terrible. He also wasn't asked to run a lot of different routes. He was asked to run a lot of shallow crosses, screens. Did see the occasional slot fade or go ball, but it was pretty rare. But I think it was more that the offense was limited than him. But he had insane yak ability, great hands. And so I thought his yak ability was his greatest strength and press coverage was his biggest weakness. In this tier is where I have Jordyn Tyson and Makai Lemon. With Jordyn Tyson, I comped him to a combination of Jerry Jeudy and Stephon Diggs. Jerry Jeudy with the nuanced route running and release packages, but Stephon Diggs with that ridiculous explosion with the ball in his hands and ability to just dominate from any part of the field. I think they're very comparable players. His quick separation versus man and great feel for zone are really good for him. And he has above average yards after catch ability, but will he stay healthy? That's, I think, his biggest weakness. And I think his route running is in general his biggest strength. Now, I've actually moved Makai Lemon up a little bit. I really like some more of the advanced stats that I've seen from him. So I kind of have him tiered now with Jordyn Tyson. I think he's a less bursty Luther Burden III. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown is a common comp that I see that also fits. He's very good versus both man and zone. Does kind of lack that top end speed, but has fantastic yak ability. So I think his hands are his biggest strength and athleticism is his biggest weakness. Then we have Ibuka. He kind of reminds me of JSN coming out. Average athlete, great versus man and zone. Not very much yards after catch ability, kind of JSN-like, but with worse yak. So I thought routes were his biggest strength and athleticism was his biggest weakness. Now we have Carnell Tate, who I think is kind of right there with Ibuka. So I think he's T. Higgins as an X or Chris Olave as a Z/slot. Kind of meh deep speed. Doesn't really separate vertically consistently that way, but does win deep. He has great hands, though, is positionally versatile. He's good versus zone, but he's never had 900 yards in his season yet in college. I do think the concerning production against ranked competition is something and a bit of a red flag. But overall, I like him as a prospect, and he can be very good at the next level. So hands, I think, are his biggest strength. He had 100th percentile contested catch ability over 2 years. That's crazy. But I think athleticism is his biggest weakness, specifically his deep speed. Also had Ladd McConkey in this tier. He reminded me a lot of Tyler Lockett. He was a route artist, incredible release packages. He just could never stay healthy. So routes were his biggest strength, in my opinion, and health was his biggest weakness. Now, in the solid tier, in terms of if these guys are taken in the first round or top of the second, what I thought about these guys being taken there, Ricky Pearsall reminded me a bit of Christian Kirk, reliable hands, above average versus man and zone, positionally versatile, but just could never stay healthy, and was a little bit of an older player that took a while to get going. So he didn't have a lot of the early production I liked, but hands were his biggest strength. You saw that catch versus that catch in college when he was with Florida one-handed while getting whacked. That was crazy. But just health has been an issue for him. I also thought Matt Golden was overrated. I did not like him. I thought he was fine, I guess, as an end of the first, top of the second guy. He reminded me of Santana Moss, but he just never truly broke out in college unless you consider the last 3 to 4 or 5 maybe games of his collegiate career as breaking out. When a receiver doesn't truly break out, I personally think a little bit lower on them, but I know he ran really fast in a straight line at the combine and got a lot of hype. But he has great deep speed, didn't really break out in my opinion, but has strong hands. I thought his hands were really good and probably his biggest strength, but you could argue his deep speed to separate. And his yak ability I thought was really average. So I thought that was one of his bigger weaknesses. Jaden Higgins, I thought he reminded me of Kenny Galladay. Great hands, great size, not a lot of deep speed and not much yak ability. I thought he was kind of like a Michael Pittman, Kenny Galladay type of player. A lot of people wanted him to be Nico Collins. I don't really think he has the athleticism that Nico Collins does, but I do think he's a good player. So hands I thought were his biggest strength, but yak was his greatest weakness. And then players that I was like, I don't know if we should be taking these guys this high. You have Xavier Worthy, who is Deshaun Jackson-ish. Dangerous deep speed and acceleration, but gets pushed around all over the field. Really small player, a definite outlier. I thought deep speed was his greatest strength and size and health was his greatest weakness. With Xavier Legette, I thought he was a poor man's DK Metcalf. You know, a fifth-year breakout is really concerning, but he had incredible straight line speed, but linear athlete. And just not somebody that I personally, not the kind of profile I would have been looking for from the first round or top of the second round type of player. And then finally, Keon Coleman, Allen Robinson Light, maybe Kelvin Benjamin. Really raw route runner, in my opinion. He did show a lot of improvement there, I thought, though, in terms of deception, especially down the field as a rookie. So I thought he actually improved there. But meh, deep speed and burst, vice grip hands, and really good ball skills, but just didn't really separate very much. So, you know, hands I thought were his greatest strength, and I thought his biggest weakness was speed. And so, yeah, that's how I think these three receivers, the top three consensus ones at least, stack up to other players that we've seen drafted in round 1 and 2 in 2024 and 2025 combined. I personally don't think that this class is as good as prior classes, even as a whole, but even specifically the receiver prospects. But I do think, once again, that all three of these receivers are going to be good at the next level. I just don't think that the top end talent is as good in terms of the all-22 film, the athleticism, the advanced stats, and the counting stats. I don't think this group's prospects really stack up to some of the elite ones that we've seen in prior years. But I do think they're going to be good. And more importantly, they are going to get the draft capital necessary to be seen as a significant investment by their team. And I do think that, once again, all three will be good players at the next level. Where do you agree? Where do you disagree? Let me know below in the comment section. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of disagreement. But once again, I don't think all classes are created equal. And I do think that this as a whole is not the best class, although all three of these guys I think are good players and will be good players in the next level. But yeah, let me know below in the comment section if you would be so kind. I would really appreciate your support via Patreon. I'm doing this full time now. So any support is appreciated. Thank you to my members. If you cannot or do not wish to, if you could just like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment below, I'd really appreciate it. Anyways, have a good day.